Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to Lunch Bunch and hanging with me and reading some books. In this series, we are going to be reading from Monstrous, the lore, gore, and science behind your favorite monsters. If you're like me, then you love, love, love monsters. And this book has so many interesting facts about where the ideas for these monsters come from, what could really be the true stories behind them, a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And it comes along with some really amazing illustrations too. So I'm going to be trying to highlight those for you when I can. And we're going to start with Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster. And I gotta be honest with you, I've never been a huge fan of Frankenstein. It's not my favorite monster. But I was blown away by some of the little facts that come out here. So there's going to be some real life scientists that are really, really scary and evil. And there's also going to be information, hi kitty, about something that I find fascinating, the year without a summer, when the entire summer was dark. And there were clouds and no crops. And that was really the inspiration for the original Frankenstein story. So let's get started. You probably already know a lot about Frankenstein. A wacky scientist steals body parts from local graves and cobbles them together to create a monster with a gigantic forehead and no eyebrows. He then brings the creature to life with a few electric jolts, and voila, a monster is born. Let's start with what gave Frankenstein's creation the first sparks of life. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, a new science called an entertainment for angels was sweeping across Europe and North America. We know it today as electricity, but before light bulbs and televisions, no one really understood what this strange force of nature actually was. Was electricity a vapor, a fluid, or a supernatural fire? There are two main types of electricity, static electricity and electric current. Now just bear with me for a second. When electricity builds up on a surface, it causes static electricity. You experience static electricity when you go down a slide. The slide transfers a positive charge to your hair, and because a positive charge repels another positive charge, your strands of hair stand on end to get away from one another. When electricity moves from one place to another, it's called an electric current. Examples of electric currents are light bulbs, batteries, motors, or in this case, Dr. Frankenstein's machine. No one in the 18th century understood how electric currents worked, but they did know one thing. Electricity could be loads of fun. Scientists of the day held electrical parties in darkened rooms where they used electrical machines to crank out sparks that would make a lady's hair stand on end or turn a boy into a human static electricity generator. In the experiment called the Flying Boy, a boy was suspended from the ceiling by silk cords while a rotating sulfur ball charged his body with static electricity. The boy would then mysteriously pull tiny pieces of feathers and gold leaf onto his charged hands like a puppeteer, making objects dance without strings. So there's a fun picture here. It kind of freaked people out, understandably. It also proved the human body could conduct electricity and made people wonder whether electricity could reanimate the dead. Italian scientist Luigi Galvani certainly thought so. In 1771, Galvani was dissecting a frog near an electrical generator when he noticed something strange. When two different pieces of metal touched a frog's nerve and its spinal cord at the same time, the leg muscle contracted. He used these experiments to hypothesize that all living beings have animal electricity, an electric fluid responsible for muscle contractions. And you can see a picture of Galvani here saying, "The animal electricity will power the world." It didn't. The real corpse reanimator. Now, making frog legs twitch was clearly entertaining, but Galvani's nephew, Giovanni Aldini, wanted to take his uncle's experiments one step further. He wanted to reanimate humans instead of amphibians. All he needed was a dead person to bring back to life. So Aldini convinced London officials to hand over the very dead corpse of a convicted murderer named George Forster so he could test his hypothesis. In January of 1803, George Forster's corpse was laid out on a cold slab in a dimly lit basement before an eager crowd. Aldini attached electrodes to Forster's head, neck, chest, limbs, and yes, even up his derriere. To these electrodes, he attached galvanic cells consisting of two oppositely charged metal plates immersed in tubes of acid. As soon as the electric current entered Forster's lifeless body, one of his eyes flickered open. His face grimaced in agony, his fingers twitched, his back arched in protest, and his chest heaved up and down, faster and faster, and then just as suddenly the body lay motionless. Frustrated, Aldini cracked open Forster's sternum and applied the current to his heart, but the shriveled organ would not beat. Aldini didn't bring Forster back to life, but he succeeded in making lifeless limbs twitch. At the very least, Forster did seem to come back to life for a few brief moments, and that terrified people. One man in the audience was so frightened he died of shock later. Aldini went on to publish accounts of his electrical experiment on Forster, and it became the talk of Europe and America. Many people wondered, could the dead be brought back to life with electricity? And here's the creepy picture. I really like spooky stuff, but I don't even think I would go see a doctor in person try and reanimate a dead body. That's just me. And now we're at the Summer of Darkness. In the spring of 1815, Mount Tambora in present-day Indonesia woke from her slumber. The volcano's eruption blanketed much of the globe with toxic ash, freezing rains, and a smoky haze that blotted out the sun. By 1816, the effects had reached even the distant shores of Geneva, Switzerland, where the days became so cold, dark, and gloomy, the period became known as the year without a summer. Inside a tiny chalet in Geneva, a 19-year-old young lady was cooped up with her brooding friends because of the bad weather. Her name was Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, and her companions were her future husband, Percy Shelley, Dr. John Polidori, Claire Clairmont, and the notorious Lord George Gordon Byron. Lord Byron was known throughout Europe as the heartthrob author of his day, with every young lady swooning over his poetry and novels. And here he is, stuck inside, which should sound pretty familiar, with all of his buddies, though. And he's saying, I'm bored. On this particular night, Byron was bored. Byron didn't like to be bored, so he suggested a challenge, a ghost story challenge. Who amongst their group could write the scariest, most blood-curdling tale? At the time, no one expected a young lady to accomplish such a feat, but Mary Shelley was not some blushing romantic. That summer, she crafted a horrific tale about a scientist named Victor Frankenstein who creates a creature from stolen body parts and brings his monster's dull, yellow eyes to life through electricity. The monster later turns on his creator, even killing Frankenstein's brother and young bride. Mary didn't pull this story out of thin air. Like most people of her day, she had heard tales of Giovanni Aldini reanimating the dead and may have attended electrical parties. Her future husband, Percy, was so fascinated by electricity that he had his own electrical machine, which he would pull from the clutter of his desk to show friends how he could make sparks crackle. Mary Shelley published her story anonymously in 1818 under the title The Modern Prometheus, but it would later be retitled Frankenstein and go on to sell millions of copies. In 1931, Universal Studios adapted the novel as the horror film Frankenstein. Over 40 adaptations have been produced, but it was actor Boris Karloff in 1931 version who became the iconic Frankenstein. Mary Shelley originally set out to write a really scary ghost story, but she ended up with a novel that explored the consequences of science. Was science powerful enough to give life? And if it was, what price would we pay? Scientists today grapple with these questions every time they assemble humanoid robots, modify genes to make better species, or create more dangerous weapons. And here's the picture of the amazing Mary Shelley. And I think that's probably enough for today, but that leaves us with a lot more information to come. Just to give you a little peek, we have a whole bunch of scary scientists that have explored the possibilities of combining humans and animals and other stuff they probably shouldn't do. So I will see you next time. Bye.